first 3 PowerPoints, I'll be really brief because this is what Professor Min-ji Kim emphasized last week in her talk. But I want to emphasize the types of sources. So this is what you are looking at, and I'm going into the the chronological order is important. So 3 kingdoms is the first historical dynasties. There are periods, proto-kingdoms before, but I mean in history of costume, 3 kingdoms. And then there were Goguryeo, and then Baekje and Silla, but it was Silla who unified it, so it becomes unified Silla. But that period corresponds to Tang Dynasty. So that's why Dr. Min-ji Kim talked a lot about that we formed official uniforms for ministers and aristocrats that were more like Chinese in style because of the Tang Dynasty. And then we have Goryeo, that's the next period, and that coincides with Song and Yuan of China. And Yuan was a very, very troublesome period. You will see the Yuan again in Chinese history as well. But Tang, Song, they were all called Han ethnic group, like dynasties ruled by Han ethnic group. Those are sort of a majority of in Chinese territory. But Yuan dynasty, the populations are all Han ethnic group, but the ruling family, the imperial family, is from Mongols. So that's a brief period of foreign rulers. And then in Korean dress history, Joseon dynasty is the most important and also long. It's 500 years long. That 500 years long, China is going through 2 different dynasties, Ming and then Qing. And again, Qing dynasty is also a foreign rule by Manchu people in the imperial family. But Korea, it's like a Joseon dynasty. And then they lost their country, so there was no country called Korea briefly for 36 years, 1910 to 45, Second World War, but then they regained independence. But unfortunately, right after the independence, the Korean Peninsula, which is long like this, was divided into 2, so North Korea and South Korea, and that's what we continuously have that political system. So just the geographic location of Korea. So as Dr. Min-ji Kim mentioned, like a Sinocentrism, or it is called centrism, or it is called Chinese cultural hegemony. Do you know the word hegemony? Anybody? Volunteer to,
Isn't it a type of government?
Yeah, it's a power structure. Mm-hmm. So hegemony is a power system. Who has the power, right? So in the United States, you can say hegemony is democracy, right? Like we have the power coming from the people. But hegemony often has this adjective. So it's a cultural hegemony, not diplomatic hegemony, or political hegemony, or economic hegemony is also a little bit different. So hegemony is, you understand it as a power system, like collectively. In East Asia, predominantly, they were under the influence of Chinese cultural hegemony. In other words, that is Sinocentrism. So in this class, actually, that's why I am starting with Japan and going one after another. I don't want you to, but so Sinocentrism is very essential in East Asia diplomacy and culture. But I don't want you to think that people outside China, meaning Mongol or Korea, Japan, or Vietnam, or in other parts, were merely following China. It is more like a, how do you call it, conversation it's all more like a ping pong game. If China does something, then people in Korea or Japan will do something. It's reciprocal. There were sometimes unilateral, movements, but China itself is very focused within their own territory. They didn't really want to bothered by Korea, Japan, Vietnam, or Mongol, or anywhere else. When Chinese politicians are concerned, China is basically around here, that central area, from Xi'an to like a Shanghai, about here, and between the Yellow River, Huanghe, and Yangtze River in the south, right there. They didn't want to think about other. And the territory, from Xi'an all the way to Shanghai, it was a huge territory. But when we talk about dress, it's same for literature and other cultural elements as well, like art or literature, like a classical literature too. Definitely intellectuals were very under the influence of Sinocentrism, Chinese cultural hegemony. So there is a constant cultural exchange, but you have to understand it as a mutual exchange rather than China always giving something and they are just the receiving end of it. That is not a good model. I actually have to create a infographics. It's more like a mutual exchange of ideas, and both were influenced by each other. You will see later that even China, they always claim that we are the center of the entire world, and like the world spins around us, but that statement is not true. That's what they wanted to project, but in fact they received numerous influences not only from the neighboring countries but also from all the way from Persia and other places. The reason China became a cultural power in the area, sort of the process that it became a cultural leader in the area is also because they were centrally located to receive many influences from other cultures, and they made it to their indigenous culture after several hundred years later. So that's something that you should think about, especially dress culture. So in the northern part, you had Goguryeo, and then somewhere here there used to be Baekje, but Baekje was already annexed by Silla by this time, 645. So Silla and Tang had a diplomatic relationship, and they made Goguryeo isolated.